Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Chapter 6 Dormammu, the Insidious Mage. The voice just fell. Dormammu had a vague premonition in his heart. After perception for a while, my heart trembled. Not good. Turn out to be. At some point, huge magic power had already come to his side. And among them, there is also some special power mixed in. Behind, the pitch-black void is connected to the passage of the dark dimension. Under this force, it is slowly closing and shrinking more and more. Insidious Mage. Losing power, Dormammu couldn't help roaring. At this time, he still doesn't know what's going on. Build the village road in the Ming dynasty, and keep Chen Kang in the dark. This riding horse was stolen by someone. Losing the dimensional channel is equivalent to losing the source of power. His entire body has been assimilated by the entire dark dimension. The source of supply also comes from the dark space. If it is cut off in this way, the connection with the dark dimension will be cut off. On top of Kamar Taj, in Mage's stronghold, isn't it at the mercy of others? Even if this is temporary, it's enough. Thinking of this, Dormammu's face suddenly became more hideous. Shameful human, actually set a trap for me, Dormammu. He suddenly had a realization in his heart. No wonder someone suddenly started the summoning ceremony. No wonder it was such a coincidence that the magic barrier on the earth suddenly disappeared. What the hell, all of this is a trap set by these guys. Dormammu couldn't help gnashing his teeth immediately, staring fixedly at the figure below. This guy, don't let me see him again. There was a gritted hatred in that cold gaze, as if he wanted to engrave him in his heart. The terrifying void slowly dissipated. Down below, with Dormammu's hateful gaze on him, Russell was also a bit puzzled. It always feels like he misunderstood something. If you let him know that Dormammu has spontaneously made up a conspiracy theory in his mind. I'm afraid I can't help but laugh too. It's just that such naked, malicious eyes made him feel a little uncomfortable. Anyway, I've offended you. If that's the case, why don't you just leave something for me? Finished. Before the dimensional channel dissipated, Russell waved his arms violently. In an instant, countless space blades reappeared. The gleaming blade struck again. However, unlike the previous ones, the power of the dark dimension has dissipated. Caught off guard, Dormammu had no time to react. I can only watch helplessly as countless sharp blades attack and slash them fiercely. Bark. After a crisp sound, the dimension channel just closed. The entire sky also returned to its original color in the blink of an eye. A piece of cloudless, pure and flawless. It's like nothing ever happened. Only buildings corroded by dark energy can prove what happened here. Below, inside the holy place, all the mages had time to breathe a sigh of relief, and the huge stone in their hearts fell to the ground. Then, the scorching gaze turned to the high platform. His face was excited, and he cheered wildly. Supreme Mage! Supreme Mage! Cheers echoed throughout the venue. And, with the passage of time, there is no sign of decay. On the contrary, it became more and more eager. That crazy look is just like the look of a star chaser when he sees his idol. Crazy. However, Russell didn't have time to meddle and let them mess around. At the moment, all his attention was on the weird energy in his hand. The color of the lacquer black seems to have been washed 10,000 times in black water. Among them, there is also the creepy and terrifying aura of Dormammu. What's this? With a daze written all over Russell's face, he checked over and over again. This thing, cut from Dormammu, is his trophy. However, he was still a little confused as to what it was. Is this a piece of flesh dug out of Dormammu? Russell was a little unsure. For Dormammu, who has completely abandoned his physical body when integrating with the dark dimension, this thing should be considered irrelevant, right? Anyway, it is also an energy state, the body can be made casually. And at this time, beside him, Ancient One glanced at it, and spoke slowly. This thing is not simple, it is the will of Dormammu. Dormammu's will. Russell was stunned. Yes, Ancient One nodded, and couldn't help laughing as he spoke. This is part of his will that he hasn't had time to take back. Theoretically speaking, it should also be regarded as a duplication of Dormammu. It's just that, in comparison, this Dormammu is a bit weak. Chapter 7, Speaking of which, in Russell's hand, a strange energy also moved along with it. Under the watchful eyes of several people, it squirmed. After a while, it turned into a sphere. This is. Russell frowned, realizing that things were not simple. Dormammu's head. One of Yuan Tuo Tuo in this hand looks like a small Dormammu. As soon as he appeared, he couldn't help but roared. Damn Ancient One, damn Mage, dare to slander me Dormammu. Snapped. Russell just slapped him across the face. What are you calling? You have no place to speak here. Beside, Ancient One couldn't help but smile too. Modu was also a little stunned. Is this really Dormammu? Why is there such a big gap from the terrifying look just now? This Dormammu is a bit weak. Russell commented sharply. It's like an empty shell. Light has the eerie air of a dark dimension. However, the strength is pitifully weak. It can only be used to frighten people. It didn't even take a lot of magic power. Russell easily locked it in the palm of his hand. Poor, it's like a toy. However, this Dormammu feels pretty good. Whether it is flattened or rounded, it cannot be hurt at all. Like a ball, full of elasticity. It will return to its original state in a short while. Kneaded in Russell's hand, at his mercy. No matter how he roared and yelled anxiously, it was useless. I can only watch and stare blankly. On the side, Ancient One couldn't help snickering a few times. This is the first time she has seen such a miserable Dormammu. After a while, I was reminded. Okay, Russell Mage, almost done. If you wait for Dormammu to react, there will be another riot. Russell's magic only temporarily cut him off from the dark dimension. If the Dormammu in front of him is connected to the dark dimension. Well, maybe, with the combination of inside and outside, the Earth is really going to be in danger. It's too dangerous to leave him on Earth. Ancient One reminded. To be on the safe side, send him back. Hearing this, Dormammu shook his body, shook his dizzy head, and shouted. Ancient One is right, if you don't put me back. Snapped. With a slap, Dormammu suddenly stopped talking. There was a hint of pain in the gritted teeth expression on his face. It's just a pity. Seeing this, Russell turned his head and said confidently. Why send it back? This is the spoils I finally got. Besides, what does this have to do with the Earth? Isn't it still a magic barrier? How could Dormammu have a chance to come in? Unless, like this time, someone secretly opened the enchantment. As he spoke, his eyes unconsciously looked over. Ancient One. What are you implying? Seeing that Ancient One didn't speak, Russell also assumed that she acquiesced. Reach out and swipe. In the space, a golden portal appeared. On the edge of the swirling vortex, countless sparks lit up. Looking around, you can still see the scene on the other side. Portal, one of the basic magic of Kamar Taj Mage. Then, he stretched out his arm and took out something from the other end of the portal. A teapot. Well, to be precise, it should be regarded as a magic weapon. Magic power emanates from its interior, and mysterious runes are engraved on it. Seeing this, Dormammu suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart, and struggled even more. It's just that no matter how hard you struggle, it's useless. Ever since, he could only yell arrogantly. What are you going to do? You know, I am Dormammu, the great master of the dark space. However, the words are not finished yet. A huge suction force was released from the teapot's mouth. Immediately afterwards, Dormammu found that the whole body was out of control. He could only watch helplessly as he walked further and further into the teapot. No. After a scream, the sound stopped abruptly. Russell couldn't help but reach out and pick his ears. Without Dormammu, it's finally quiet. This set of actions was done in one go, and it was already too late when Ancient One reacted. Looking at the teapot in Russell's hand, she was speechless for a moment. Don't tell me that you have prepared this thing a long time ago. Russell has the ability to make magical artifacts, which she already knew. However, who would have thought that he would have prepared such a container? This made Ancient One wonder whether he had expected such a thing to happen today. Regarding this, Russell just smiled and didn't say much. This is called being prepared. Chapter 8, Now, I have agreed to your conditions and inherited the position of Supreme Mage. Russell rubbed his hands together and laughed. Then, this book of Emperor Weixin. As he spoke, his eyes unconsciously followed her. The intended meaning is obvious. Hand over the good things to me. If he hadn't been thinking about the book of Emperor Weixin, which can be called the Encyclopedia of White Magic, Russell wouldn't have agreed so easily. Now, the conditions are fulfilled and the test is passed. It's time to hand this thing over to him. Anyway, he is also the current supreme mage. For you. Ancient One rolled his eyes, and casually put the book of Emperor Weixin in his hand. Although there are some deviations in the process. However, the result of the matter made her very satisfied. Although he refused outright, lacking a sense of responsibility. However, the fighting power is really strong. Cooperate with the magic enchantment constructed by the three holy places. More than enough to protect Kamar Taj, and indeed Earth. Perhaps, he will be able to surpass me in a short time. Ancient One was deeply moved. It's only been a long time, and it's already been able to achieve this level. It's only a matter of time before she surpasses her. In contrast, she felt that she had spent hundreds of years living on dogs. The smile on Russell's face became brighter as he took the book of Wysandi. What makes this book precious is not just the large amount of magic recorded in it. It is because it is originally a powerful magic weapon. In other words, it is not an exaggeration to call it an artifact. Especially when dealing with black magic, it is their nemesis. Rubbing the rune-covered cover, Russell felt a little anxious. Can't wait to open the book and learn the magic on it. Correct. As if thinking of something suddenly, Russell suddenly came back to his senses. Turning around, he asked, "What do you think about Caecilius, a follower of Dormammu?" While they were talking, as the root on the bright side, the initiator of everything. Seeing that the situation was not good, Caecilius had oiled the soles of his feet, and ran away first. However, I didn't care too much. Russell believes that under his own control, he can't make any big troubles. Hearing this, Ancient One smiled slightly, shook his head. Now you are the supreme mage, this matter should be handled by you. Okay, I knew you would say that. Russell pouted, feeling a little helpless. This Ancient One is determined to abdicate and ignore the matter, and he has no choice but to take over. Now, turn around. His eyes looked at the figure standing on the other side. Modu Mage, then please order me to list Caecilius as a key surveillance target. Once you find traces, arrest them immediately. Definitely, if he chooses to resist, he will live or die. Mordo was shocked immediately. The temper of this new supreme mage. It seems a little irritable. These words are equivalent to directly announcing the death penalty to Caecilius. Just imagine, this follower of Dormammu. If you encounter the pursuit of the Holy Place Mage, can you resist not to make a move? One man against the whole of Kamar Taj is a deadly situation. However, he couldn't disobey Russell's orders. I had no choice but to respectfully agree. Yes, Supreme Mage, and the other side. Shield, Trident Building. This is located on the banks of the Potomac River, in the giant white curved building across the river. Looking at the information in front of him, Nick Fury had a headache. For the leader of an organization that is huge enough to rival any country in this world. Few things bothered him anymore. And now, just such a thing happened. Phil Coulson agent, are you sure the above stuff is real? It's not the product of some guy's processing. Nick Fury pointed to the photo on the table and couldn't help asking again. Next to him, Phil Coulson nodded helplessly. In this minute, this question has been asked no less than 3 times. Although this is really hard to accept, I am sure that this is the real picture. There is no trace of artificial processing, and it is not a PS photo. This is the real picture under satellite monitoring. Hearing this, Nick Fury couldn't help touching his bare head. Looking at the photos on the table, he frowned. If these are true, then what are the above? Alien visitor. Forgive his short-sightedness. He really couldn't tell what the thing on the photo was. A dark and terrifying black hole, and a giant monster crawling out of it. And the unidentified luminous body that filled the entire sky with light. That's all there is to it in the pictures taken by these satellites. It is not that he has never seen alien creatures. What Skrulls, Kree or something like that. Even had close contact with these alien visitors and learned about them. It's just that he has never seen the things on these photos. But, just by looking at the photos, he couldn't help feeling a sense of danger in his heart. It's like the relationship between hunter and prey. This is the warning given to him by the sixth sense in the dark. After realizing this, Nick Fury's complexion suddenly turned ugly. It's just that all of this was covered up under his pristine black skin, making it difficult for people to notice it. Only through his furrowed brows could one notice something strange. Phil Coulson agent, have you arranged for people to go to the location of the incident to gather information? It's been arranged. Phil Coulson nodded. There are 2 agent teams on their way to Kamar Taj. 2 agent teams. Nick Fury muttered to himself, and unconsciously put his eyes on the photo. After flickering his eyes for a while, he shook his head seriously. Not enough. Send me 2 more agent teams. This sudden event cannot be controlled at all. And the warning from the sixth sense aggravated his sense of crisis in his heart. Even if you dig 3 feet into the ground, you must find out the truth of the matter. Nick Fury said solemnly, whether they are humans, ghosts, or aliens, you have to find out for me. However, our current manpower is not enough, and we don't have any extra manpower to send over. Phil Coulson spread his hands, his face full of helplessness. Hearing this, Nick Fury frowned. After thinking for a while, he said sharply, then bring back the team from the Middle East. As for the hunt for Tony Stark, let's put it aside for now. We must investigate this matter thoroughly. Chapter 9. Kamar Taj, inside the magic holy place. In the center, the holy place belonging to the Supreme Mage is located here. The splendid and eye-catching palace makes people understand the status of the owner at a glance. This is the holy place of Ancient One, and the most sacred residence in everyone's mind. But at the moment, there has been a new owner here. Sitting cross-legged on the seat, Russell held the Book of Wysandi in his hand and read it carefully. Meow meow incense, like a fairy. The leisurely look is simply extra enjoyable. Raising his hand, he took a sip of the tea, and Russell couldn't help feeling a little emotional. It's no wonder Ancient One likes to make tea here. Such a day is really a kind of enjoyment. But soon, the quiet and peaceful atmosphere was broken. Russell Mage. A voice came, and the figure of Ancient One appeared in the holy place. What's the matter, Ancient One Mage? Russell put down the book of Emperor Wyshan and asked helplessly. These days, Ancient One gave him everything about Supreme Mage. What is the scope of responsibility, what needs to be paid attention to, and so on. However, there was no clue of what he wanted. At least give him some artifacts. It's really hard to get something good out of her hand. Russell was speechless, but fortunately, the only thing to be thankful for is the Eye of Agamotto, aka the Time Gem, is finally in his hands. It is logical to have an infinite gems. However, the appearance of this infinite gems is not good. That green light made him unconsciously think of something. Russell Mage, things are almost done. I believe that under your leadership, Kamar Taj will develop better and reach new heights. Ancient One's expression was inexplicable, and he said faintly, then it's almost time for me to say goodbye to you. Farewell. Russell was startled. You mean, you're leaving Kamar Taj? In response, Ancient One smiled heartily and nodded. Yes, to be precise, it should be leaving the earth. The next job is up to you. ... Really just leave? Russell was speechless. He also counted on Ancient One to help him with his affairs. No matter how bad he is, he can still act as a thug. However, after thinking about it, Russell felt relieved. The departure of Ancient One may be a matter of time. Even if he didn't show up, she would still find a way to get out. Just refer to the original plot. As the Supreme Mage, the Ancient One who blocked countless invasions from outside the territory, would be stabbed to death by his own disciple. Moreover, what kind of soul dissipates, the kind that dies and can't die again? It's just ridiculous to say it. He doesn't know if Ancient One is a mortal body. However, one thing is certain. At least he won't be stabbed to death with a knife. Regarding how to continue life in the soul state, Russell has several methods in his mind. He didn't believe that the Ancient One, who had lived for hundreds of years, would not be aware of this. Well, there is only one truth. Ancient One must have escaped by feigning death. All of this, she pretended to show Dr. Strange. The purpose is to enable him to strengthen his beliefs and at the same time stimulate his potential. And Ancient One can retire logically. All of this sounds like something an office worker would do in order to retire. It's just that Ancient One's abacus has already arranged everything one after another. But now, the handover of work is complete, and even such important things as the Book of Emperor Wyshan have been handed over to him. Russell had no reason to stop him, so he nodded helplessly. All right, have a nice trip, Ancient One Mage. Don't forget to go back to Earth often. especially when purple sweet potato essence comes to Earth to find fault. Ancient One smiled, nodded and said, "Will do. However, before I leave, I think it is necessary to take you to a place." "Where?" Russell asked curiously. Could it be that there are places in the whole magic holy place that I don't know about? Not to mention that as the Supreme Mage, he holds the control of the entire Kamar Taj in his hands. His powerful telepathy ability alone can cover the entire Kamar Taj, making everything invisible. He was a little curious about what Ancient One said. However, Ancient One obviously didn't mean much to say. With a mysterious smile, he waved his hand and opened a portal in front of him. "Come with me." After finishing speaking, he stepped directly into Gold's portal. Russell was a little confused for a moment. But I had no choice but to follow in. Another side. It is inside a closed room. In the center, there is a globe with huge amounts of. This is the magic enchantment control center of the entire Kamar Taj, as well as the location of the passage connecting the three holy places. At the same time, it can also monitor the magical power of the entire Earth. The whole magical holy place, this is one of the most important places. As soon as he walked out of the door, Russell was a little dazed, pointing. "This is the place you mentioned. Didn't you already explain it a few days ago?" "There are still some things that haven't been explained clearly." Ancient One shook his head, narrowed his eyes and smiled. "This is the most important place in Kamar Taj. Not only because this is the control center, but also because of something hidden here." While speaking, she came to the center and skillfully opened a mechanism. Immediately, a crystal-like orb floated beneath huge amounts of the globe. Then, she chanted the spell. Not long after, a deep portal appeared in front of him. "Ha," one said after another, "how about playing with dolls?" Russell was a little puzzled. But immediately, Ancient One's words solved the doubts in his heart. "Didn't you always want those artifacts in my hand? Here lies the collection that has been gathered since the founding of Kamar Taj." Hearing this, Russell suddenly realized. No wonder it's so mysterious. It turned out to be a treasure room. Chapter 10. Although I have already guessed in my heart. However, what Russell never expected was that Ancient One would put the treasure room in such a place. In the control center of this Kamar Taj, everyone's first gaze will be on the huge globe and several portals. And no one will notice the organs hidden in it at all. This is the so-called darkness under the lights. Russell felt a little emotional. Moreover, this small warehouse of Ancient One is actually located in another space. It simply far exceeded everyone's expectations. Step into the interior of the space passage. Russell suddenly felt his eyes light up, and his vision suddenly became clear. Inside, the light of magic is shrouded, and the magic runes all around flicker. If it were normal, he would definitely not be able to help analyzing the structure of these magics, trying to figure out how they work. But now, his mind is not on this at all. As soon as he entered the door, his gaze was attracted by the showcase in the center. This is the #1 artifact in the entire Marvel, Vatum Wand. Agamotto Gem. There is also a prophetic artifact, the Cosmic Cauldron. The display cabinets are full of collections. Among them, there are not a few that Russell can recognize. Turning around in a circle, the smile on his face became brighter and brighter. Not bad, this Ancient One collection really didn't disappoint me. The richer the collection here, the more artifacts he has, the happier he is. Because, after Ancient One left, these good things are reserved for him. Seeing this, Ancient One smiled slightly and said, "The reason why these things are stored here is because they haven't found a suitable owner." Definitely, she doesn't need it is also one of the important reasons. In terms of her strength, these magic weapons don't have much effect on her. After closing his eyes and meditating for a while, Ancient One spoke again. "There is still a little time, Russell Mage, go out with me for a walk." Holy place periphery. Walking on the stone road, Ancient One looked around. A trace of nostalgia flashed in his eyes from time to time. But soon, she shook her head and looked away. Turning his head, he turned his gaze to Russell beside him. "Do you know why I chose you as Supreme Mage, Russell Mage?" Russell suddenly recovered from his contemplation, a little surprised and uncertain. "I don't know. Isn't it because of my powerful magical ability and strength?" Hearing this, Ancient One suddenly burst out laughing. That's just one of the reasons. As she said that, her eyes looked towards the sky, far away and deep. Do you know that since your arrival, the whole world has quietly changed? The timeline is in chaos. Even with the eye of Agamotto, it is completely impossible to see the exact future from it. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Predict future. The traveler effect. Russell murmured to himself. However, what does this have to do with me being the supreme mage? At the beginning, he never thought that he would take over such a mess. As for the supreme mage, just leave it to Wan Fu. This is a thankless position, where if you mess up, you will be blamed. The average person really can't take it. Facing his puzzled eyes, Ancient One smiled slightly, but did not answer right away. Immediately afterwards, he swiped his hands. In front of him, a phantom like a long river suddenly spread out. This is the original timeline of the whole world, rushing forward all the way. However, since your arrival, it has become like this. As soon as the words are finished, the phantom in front of him suddenly changed. The straight and complete river was cut off in the middle at a certain moment, splitting into countless small tributaries. Did the urine fork? Russell couldn't help complaining. Ancient One's head was covered with black lines. God damn the bifurcation, this is obviously because the timeline is messed up by you, okay. Although the original timeline has hundreds of millions of possibilities. However, it is still within the predictable range. However, the current situation is completely unpredictable. However, it's all so obvious. There is no need for Ancient One to say anything, Russell himself has already fully understood it. The future is completely out of control, that's why you chose me as the heir. Am I right, Ancient One Mage? That's right, Ancient One nodded, with a childish and gratifying look on his face. Originally there was someone else in the position of Supreme Mage, but now this happens. Speaking of this, it suddenly turned into a helpless sigh. Russell understood what she meant, and couldn't help feeling pity in his heart. Poor Wanfu, just abandoned. It's almost time, and it's time for me to leave here. Farewell, Russell Mage. Ancient One's eyes flickered, and his deep eyes seemed to be looking at an unknown distance. Then, the power of magic enveloped. Chanting the incantation opened a deep passage in front of him. This different portal suddenly made Russell feel something was wrong. In it, he seemed to be able to detect some familiar breath. Breath of Dormammu. Then behind this passage is a multi-universe. Russell was speechless for a moment. You agreed to leave the Earth, but you thought you wanted to wander around the universe. Unexpectedly, you actually want to travel the multi-universe. Not long after, Ancient One waved his hand with a smile, and stepped into the portal. And it was only at this moment that Russell suddenly realized something in his heart. He remembered something and turned around and shouted. Wait, Ancient One Mage, leave a contact information before leaving. However, it was always a step slower, and the figure of Ancient One disappeared in front of him one step earlier. Russell suddenly felt some headaches. What the hell, the multi-universe has no concept of time at all. I'm afraid it will take several years to visit Ancient One. But then again, can magical communication cross multi-universes and connect with Ancient One? Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.